Coming soon to own on video
YouTube
and
and Twitch.
DVD.
The original, oh, hold on, the original The Boys adaptation. So I knew, well, I didn't know it before the show came out, but I knew The Boys had a comic and an animated series at the same time. But a lot of people said the comics were so bad, and the comics were so like not even weird. It was just like too edgy to the point where it wasn't even a good story in general. That's what I hear from a lot of people that say about the comics, and I've seen a lot of weird scenes in the comics. But it is The Boys, so you gotta expect weird shit. So I'm expecting something very weird from the original adaptation of The Boys, based on how weird the comics are. Let's get straight into it.
Back in the early to mid 2010s, superhero media was really starting to kick off, with both Marvel and DC beginning to pump out as much content as possible. Of course, when there's a type of story being made frequently, it was inevitable that some creatives would want to be a bit more unique and out there with their stories, leading to
Mm-hmm.
an influx of adaptations based on
True.
deconstructionist superhero media, films like Watchmen and Kick-Ass, for example. By
Both good movies.
far one of the most notorious superhero deconstructions that had yet to be adapted at the time was The Boys, a comic series so dark it had to move to a different publisher. There's no doubt that The Boys was a very dark and mean-spirited take on the superhero story, to the point where I do wonder how anyone found any enjoyment out of it. So it made me
Is that
wonder as
bad?
well, who would ever adapt this to the big screen, and if audiences were even ready to accept such a bold story to begin with.
Nah, I feel like the current The Boys show did a great job taking that weirdness and shifting its focus. It's still weird, but it's I wouldn't say a digestible weird because it is digestible, but it's from the shit I've seen in the comics, it's way less, and for the better. For the better, it's way less weird and edgy.
Columbia Pictures first optioned the comic book in 2008, attaching Matt Mafredi and Bill Hay. This was interesting because by this point, it was strange that a studio would even seek to adapt The Boys to begin with. Most
Facts.
superhero IP by this point were the major titles like Batman and Spider-Man, so it does lead me to believe that The Boys was only picked up due to its reputation at the time, so maybe the studio felt that its controversial nature was ripe for storytelling. So after the writing began for the film, we got nothing. For 2 years there was radio silence up until 2010 when the writers finally surfaced to talk about their approach. And here's where it gets very interesting. They weren't trying to translate the comic panel for panel. They had permission to change things and to loosen the adaptation, taking massive inspiration while carving out its own narrative liberties. But this may not be as simple as you may think. As you'll
Now that's
find
a
out
hard
later,
job.
the writers confirmed that they were keeping the dark, gruesome nature of the source material. Key moments from the comic were slated to make it into the script, presumably moments like the death of Huey's girlfriend, but since this was not a one-to-one adaptation, the specifics behind the scene were likely altered. For example, in the comic,
Oh yeah, A Train was white and the Deep was black. But also the Deep wore like ancient, not ancient, but like the head scuba gear, you
A-Train is
know.
partially responsible for her death, but it wasn't because he smashes right into her, like in the final Amazon series. The movie probably had its own variation of that brutal inciting incident, but there's no way we could possibly predict what it was. Then the director hunt began. Samuel Bayer, fresh off Nightmare on Elm Street, expressed interest in the project, and you could honestly see how he'd handle the more gruesome aspects of the comic. But apparently Adam McKay was the one actually in the running. By June
True.
2010, it was confirmed that McKay was in talks to direct. Now McKay at first glance seemed like a strange choice. He was not exactly known as a director who handled such dark and edgy stories like The Boys. Most of his films were satirical comedies. However, perhaps his experience with satire is what made him perfect for a
That is true, but I feel like there's nothing wrong with trying to build range. It's more or less they're trying to put they're putting the weight of the start, like they're trying to plan a franchise and you're trying to start out with somebody. Like imagine trying to give somebody the game-winning shot in the playoffs, game 7, and he hasn't played all season. He's been on the bench. You give him the game-winning shot. Well, no, he's played in the G League a little bit, but he hasn't played in the NBA a lot. And you try to give him the game-winning shot, and he misses. It'd be
Satirical
like, why the
take on
fuck he's in
superhero
there?
stories, but it would still be a wonder how he'd possibly adapt the more gross aspects of the plot.
Yikes.
McKay actually had a vision for the movie. He talked about making it visually striking, comparing it to Watchmen and Kick-Ass, and even contemplated whether 3D would work for the material. By March 2011,
3D? Oh, hell no. Could you imagine the current The Boys in 3D? Fuck around, a nigga ass cheeks just come flying out the screen. Dick and balls just swinging. Oh, hell no.
he was actively brainstorming and looking for actors to cast. He spoke to Russell Crowe about potentially playing Billy Butcher. Crowe's intensity mixed with Butcher's
Nah, he don't got it in him. Like I don't know the actor's name, but the person that cast Billy Butcher was definitely the perfect role.
vicious charm may have worked pretty well here. At least this take would have been quite different from the comic version, and even
I don't see it. Nah, I think it's because I'm seeing him with long hair. Maybe he would have cut it, but I still don't see it.
the version played by Carl Urban. And then there's Simon Pegg. Huey was partially modeled after
I forgot he was like. I'm not gonna lie, that's a 1-to-1 to the comics though.
by
He's
Carl
a
Urban. And then there's Simon
he's a 1-to-1. Like if we're going off the comic Huey, I don't know like his this discography. I don't know how good of an actor he is, but he's a 1-to-1 to comic book Huey.
Pegg. Huey was partially modeled after Pegg in the comics, so McKay encouraged him to audition. Pegg did read the script and expressed interest in the part, so it's not entirely impossible that he would have played Huey in the movie if it was ever made. There's also another interesting actor that was thrown around to potentially play a character. That was Aaron Eckhart, who was brainstormed as a good choice to play Homelander by
Homelander. Oh no, he's played the villain before. I'm not gonna, he was good. He was a good Two Face. I definitely give him that. But Homelander, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm trying to think. I'm thinking of him as Two Face
Adam McKay. If you've
or
seen
Harvey
his
Dent.
roles, you can definitely imagine how Eckhart could perfectly balance the charm of Homelander
But I feel like the way Anthony Mack portrays Homelander would have been different. The way Eckhart tries to portray Homelander, like Homelander really sells the he had no structure growing up and he has nobody to help him really. Everybody is kind of just fuck you in a sense. And he's kind of like a man child that's like mentally unstable and he is emotionally unstable. Eckhart, I feel like maybe because I'm still thinking about his role in Two Face, like the way he'll try to portray that would be way different.
and his boiling darkness within. By February 2012, the whole thing collapsed. Columbia dropped it, likely due to creative differences with Adam McKay. McKay mentioned that Paramount picked it up afterwards, trying to develop it further, but that must have fell apart too. Why gamble on an ultra-violent satire when you could just make another Spider-Man film? So the movie died, and honestly, it probably died for the right reasons. And I would like to take a look on how McKay's The Boys adaptation would have been like potentially. Okay, so as established before, this would have been a film adaptation of The Boys, which already makes us run into a few problems. The Boys is a very, very long comic series, and as a
Damn, how long is it?
result, it does mean that the contents have to be condensed in some way to make it work. It's a bit more manageable if you can create a trilogy out of the comic series, but considering the longevity of these edgy superhero films in the early 2010s, I can't really see how that would work. There's also the problem that if you did make a trilogy, each individual film still has to condense a metric ton of story into 2 hours of runtime. Maybe Matt Mifredi and Phil Hay could have pulled it off. I'm not entirely
I don't think they would have got the whole story in 2 hours, but they definitely if they if they would have did the intro of the first movie correctly, they definitely could have got a trilogy. but there is a lot of weird. It depends on which route they actually went. If they went how the current boys went with the way they intro the characters, they definitely could have got a trilogy off. If they went with the comic book version, that shit would have died and flopped.
Sure about their quality of writing, but maybe this time around, thanks to their passion, they could have found a way to do it. The writers did say that the movie wasn't going to be a one-to-one adaptation, so they don't entirely have to worry about how to condense the exact moments of the story. Based on this description, I can't imagine that The Boys would only loosely adapt the comic. It would have the same characters, the same overall story about corrupt heroes, and a team trying to keep them in check. But I'm not so sure if anything else would have been the same. We do know for a fact that the major plot beats and moments in the story would have been presented. It's hard to know what would count as a major story moment, but the ones I can think of are the death of Huey's girlfriend, Starlight finding out the true nature of the Seven, and the failed plane rescue. I can also imagine things being changed around, like which characters die in the narrative, making it so you can't rely on the comic to guess. I also do wonder
I like when like shows and movies do that, where like they loosely follow comic book lore. They don't follow it to a T, but they still follow it a little bit. So people can't really spoil like what is supposed to happen next. Like if I'm watching something and people start posting comic books spoiling, hey, this will gonna happen in the next movie or TV show or next episode, it's like, but what the fuck? But now it's you could try to do that and they go a whole different direction. That's why I just me
if the
personally I like when
boys
they
would
do
have
that.
kept their super strength in the film as they did in the comic. This was a superhero blockbuster, so maybe they did keep it for the purpose of keeping the audience entertained. Honestly, thank God this was not a one-to-one adaptation, because anyone who has read The Boys knows just how bad the story really is. The pacing is terrible. Every single character is horribly unlikable, except for maybe Starlight and Huey, and the story is so mean-spirited, so edgy, and so horrible that it feels like an edgy teenager is the one that wrote it. Some major changes would have to be made to even make it tolerable to a
Not gonna lie, I never knew who the authors were of the comics. Looking at them, I expected them to be older, but I didn't expect them to be that old. Like I expected them to make this like when they were like, in their 30s, like or late 20s, you know. I didn't expect them to be that age they are now.
general public.
Right
This
at
would
that time.
include altering the characterizations of many of the characters, such as Homelander and the Seven, to make them less of a bunch of perverted freaks, making the
Yep.
boys less homicidal maniacs and perverted freaks, and cutting out many of the side cast who again are perverted freaks. According to Adam McKay in an interview with Cinema Blend, the script for the movie was actually very faithful to the comic. So there is a chance that this The Boys movie would actually be very faithful to the events of the actual original comic, unlike the Amazon TV show, which is
Ah, see, and here's where we probably would have fucked up. Yeah,
only
that
loosely based on it. Perhaps that's why Adam McKay was being looked at as the director for this movie. Adam McKay's Boys would probably lean much harder into the absurd nature of his early works, turning the comic's mean-spirited deconstruction into a loud, blockbuster satire that didn't hold back on its corporate superhero commentary, and perhaps this comedic style would have been enough to make the characters a bit more tolerable.
definitely think having that one comedic writer or director would have made the comical part in the movie better. But I definitely think for the boys, that's a rough transition. I get like wanting to be like have a general range in a wide range of genre that you work in, but trying to adapt the boy that's a very rough switch if you're not already in that category doing those type of weird things and not even just body horror in itself, just some of the things they do in the boys comic. With that being said, let me know how y'all feel about that. I'll see y'all later though.
You don't own my soul. Get your hands off of me. Wanna rest my bones when I am free. Yeah, control my heart. Knows when I am free. You don't hold my soul. Get your hands off of me. Wanna rest my bones when I am free. You can't control my heart. Knows when I am free. You don't hold my soul. Get your hands off of me. Wanna rest my